Joining me is Dan Mirvish. He's an award-winning director, producer, screenwriter, and author. He's also the co-founder of the Sundance Film Festival, and he's here today to talk about his latest award-winning film called 18 and a Half. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having me on.
Too bad I wasn't there at the Whistler Film Festival, but here we are after, and congratulations on your film. It's 18 minutes and 30 seconds. Is that correct?
Well, the name of the film is 18 and a half, but yeah, it's about the 18 and a half minute gap in the Nixon Watergate tapes.
Yeah, so it's been getting so much feedback, and it's been filmed, actually shown in Brazil, Spain, Anchorage, Alaska. Like, it's just amazing. You've been to Whistler many times, and
yeah, this was my third time with the film, and I love it. It's a great festival, great audiences there.
Yeah. So tell us, what was the process like in making the film?
Well, we probably the most interesting thing is we decided to start shooting on March 3rd, 2020. What could possibly go wrong in March of 2020? And we found out that we were actually the last film shooting in North America before the pandemic. And I was like, oh, that's everyone else must know something we don't know. So we shut down after our 11th day. So we shot for 11 days and then shut down. And we were shooting out on the tip of Long Island in New York. And but I'm from LA, so I flew back to LA and started editing the film. And then so we wound up taking a 6-month healthy hiatus or pandemic pause. And then we came back once the Screen Actors Guild and Directors Guild came up with kind of COVID safe protocols for filming again. We went back in September, exactly 6 months later, and finished the last 4 days of the film. So, but by then I had a pretty good sourdough starter. So I was baking sourdough for the cast and crew, and, we muddled through it. So.
Yes, congratulations. Now,
Thanks.
the film is based on the Watergate scandal in 1974.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, what is the film about? I mean,
Sure. So it's a fiction film. It's a historical fiction. It's not a documentary. And it takes place in the middle of the Watergate scandal, when there was this 18 and a half minute gap in the Nixon tapes that were erased. And when everyone discovered that someone had erased them, and it's to this day still a mystery who erased them and why they were erased, that really led and accelerated the push for impeachment for Nixon, and ultimately caused him to resign. So, but our story is fictional, and it's about a young woman in the Nixon White House who's a transcriber, and she gets a hold of the missing 18 and a half minute gap as a tape and wants to leak it to a reporter, and they meet up at a seaside motel. But then when his tape recorder doesn't his reel-to-reel player doesn't work, they have to borrow one from someone in the motel. So there's hippies, there's swingers, there's and ultimately there's nefarious people also trying to get the tape. So it's a bit of a thriller. It's a comedy if people laugh. It's just a thriller if they don't laugh, and that's fine too. So it's a fun movie and a nice dive into the mid 1970s.
Yes, I mean, the film is for everyone, really. I mean, it's like you said, it's a thriller, it's a comedy, it's something for everyone. And I love the trailer. I love the way it opens with her driving, and it's so suspenseful. It's drama. It's a film that, as I said, for everyone, really. But tell us about Bruce Campbell? He's the voice of Nixon. So
yes,
how did you pick the cast? And
well, Bruce is someone I'd wanted to work with on a previous film, and that scheduling didn't work out. And then even on this film, we had talked about playing one of the other parts in the film, and then that scheduling didn't work out. I mean, he's a pretty busy guy. But then when I suggested having him play the voice of Nixon, that really appealed to him. And scheduling wise, we knew we could be a lot more flexible with it because it was a voice performance. But he had played Reagan in an episode of Fargo, and got a lot of attention for that just a couple of years ago. And it turns out he was obsessed with Watergate as much as I was, or anyone was, when he was a teenager, in the States anyway. We had all of the regular reruns we'd watch, Gilligan's Island, whatever, would be preempted by these Watergate hearings, the Senate Watergate hearings. And so he was obsessed with watching that, and he had actually done his own kind of take on Watergate and Nixon with some other work he'd done with Ted Raimi, and so he really leapt at the chance to do the voice of Nixon, and then we got Ted Raimi to do Al Haig, and John Cryer was our third big voice to play Haldeman, who was Nixon's aide, and what was nice was that during that 6-month gap when we were off taking our healthy hiatus, actors were sitting at home not acting. And so that turned out to be the perfect time to record the 18.5-minute gap, the Nixon tapes, because we could do it with all the actors basically at home on Zoom. And so that's how we recorded it. So it wound up being a really nice thing. Like in the middle of the deepest, quarantine, we could all kind of keep working and stay creative and do almost a little mini radio drama in the middle of this film. So it was great working with Bruce. He's such a sweetheart.
Yes, and you say the healthy time. I mean, it was because you made it work, right?
Yeah.
Through Zoom, and also too, like, how much research was involved?
So we did quite a lot of research. I mean, I kind of came up with the initial story idea and then collaborated with a screenwriter named Daniel Moya. And I've got a lot of my own kind of background in Watergate. I was a history and political science major, and I knew a few people kind of tangentially involved with Watergate and lived in Washington. And so I knew, or I thought I knew a lot, but then I teamed up with a younger writer, guy who was only 24 at the time, who really didn't know much about Watergate at all. And so kind of this combination between the two of us, we did quite a lot of research, but it was nice too, because we could balance it out with like, okay, if you don't know anything about Watergate, are you going to understand this part of the script? And if you know too much about Watergate, are you going to understand this other thing? So it was a really good balance. But we did quite a lot of research looking at the original tapes, the ones that don't have gaps in them, and books and articles and things like that. And so much of that era has come out now since, in the 50 years since, that we know so much more about what was really going on. And so because we wanted, even though our main characters are all fictional, we wanted all the real parts around them to be as accurate as possible. So yeah, we
Yeah.
did a lot of research.
Wow. And Dan, so what do you want people to take away from the film?
Well, I think I 19 Watergate was an interesting moment, at least in U.S. history, and I think this is reflected around the world too, in that it was really kind of the end of innocence, the end of the 50s and 60s. It was really when people realized, oh, the government might be lying to you, and you couldn't trust authority, and it was a real disheartening moment that kind of led to a lot of cynicism in the world. It reflects a little bit on our current, well, not so much our current president right now, but the very last president we had. We came up with this idea right after Trump was elected in 2016, and but I knew also, you don't want to make something about what's happening now, because by the time people see it, it could be years later. But the nice thing about Nixon is that people can kind of read into him as an analogy to anyone and anywhere. So people can read Trump into him, but when we showed it in Brazil, people were like, oh yeah, this is really about Bolsonaro, and I think that's the interesting thing, is there's so many, Nixon and Watergate kind of set the template for what a paranoid, potential authoritarian, regime it can be like, and it's a warning, that it can happen again, and it doesn't take geniuses to make it run. I mean, the people, Nixon and his cronies doing Watergate, were kind of idiots a lot of the time, but they were in power, and so they could get away with so much. Or at least almost get away with it, and that's really the real truth is, or the real message is, that one person can make a difference. And in this case, it's our young heroine in the film who can make a difference, but it could be anyone, who leaks the truth and gets it out there.
Wow. And speaking of making a difference, you have over 20 years experience. You're a speaker, as I said at the beginning, the author, and So I want to talk about your other films, Between
Mhm.
Us and Bernard Huey.
Bernard and
Um,
Huey. Yeah.
yes, it was based on a 1957 script. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Bernard and Huey was the screenplay was written in 19 it was written by Jules Feiffer, who's a very famous Pulitzer, Oscar, Obie winning, Tony nominated genius. Who was a cartoon, mainly known as a cartoonist for The Village Voice, but had also, as a screenwriter, had written Carnal Knowledge, the Mike Nichols 1971 film, and Popeye, that Robert Altman directed. Anyway, and I had read an article about him, and it said he had several unproduced screenplays. So I found a screenplay, and together he and I kind of searched for it. And we unearthed the screenplay that he'd written in 1986, but was based on characters exactly that go back to 1957. So it was the 60-year-old you know, property essentially. And anyway, and then we kind of updated it to be for contemporary times, but it was so timeless in its characters and dialogue that we didn't really need to update it that much. Anyway, so that was the last film I did before this one. That was we did that about 4 years ago.
Yes. And what drives you, Dan? I mean, you're award-winning independent film producer. You help others through the Sundance Film Festival. Like,
Slam dance, slam
slam
dance.
dance, the slam dance.
Yeah,
Um,
that's all right.
but what keeps you, motivated with so much experience?
Yeah. Well, I try to have fun with it. The name of I've written a couple books, and it's called The Cheerful Subversive's Guide to Independent Filmmaking. So I try to keep it cheerful and have fun, because really, making films is really hard work, and it's really frustrating. You're dealing with 99% of people are going to say no to whatever it is you're pitching, whether you're raising money or trying to get distribution or casting. But you just need that one person to say yes, or you need 400 people to say yes but only $1, and that's fine too. um, and so you wind up building these little communities around each of these films. We have 400 backers, and even though it's a tiny film in terms of the number of crew, we only had about 22 crew members, but we've got all these people around the world really that have helped us make the film. And so you kind of build these communities around each film. And then I love going to film festivals too. I mean, it's a great excuse to go to Spain and Anchorage and Whistler and Barbados, and these amazing places that I probably never would go to otherwise. So that's fun. And then it's great to then meet filmmakers from all those other countries, and exchange ideas and collaborate very often with them. One of my producers is a French director, who I met at a festival years ago. And so for me, I have a good time with it. And also just creatively as an artist, I'm not a very good artist in any other one medium. I can't draw very well. I can't do music very well, but I can make a movie. Somehow I figured out, I'm halfway decent at coming up with a visual image, and I'm pretty decent at editing, and I can write lyrics to songs, but then collaborate with a composer. And I enjoy all that, all of that. That for me, that's the nice thing. There's a great quote from the late director Monty Hellman, who said, if you make a movie for money and it loses money, it's a failure. If you make a movie for art and it loses money, you still have the art. And I think that's a really great way to kind of contextualize what we're doing with indie film. And that's why I love festivals so much, is because if you make a film and nobody sees it, it's like the tree in the forest, doesn't really exist. But it's really only at festivals that you can engage with an audience and do Q&As and do introductions and run into them a day later, and they say, oh, wait, I had another question about this other thing. And that's really what I love about it's almost like doing an actor doing a performance. You only really have that validation when an audience laughs or cries or shrieks or whatever it is they're going to do.
And that feels good when there's
Hmm.
that connection, and
Absolutely.
people are really are passionate as you are, or they're just they inspire you. And
Yeah.
yeah, forgive me, I meant to say Sundance Film Festival.
That's all right.
But what is next for you, Dan?
Mm. Well, the process with this film with 18 and a half is still going to go on for a long time. We have a number of festivals lined up in the springtime around the world. And we've also been talking to a lot of distributors, including just today. I had a nice chat with a Canadian distributor. So, and I think what's going to happen is ultimately by next June, we're going to have some sort of a release of the film, probably some theaters, and hopefully by June, I mean, by waiting till June, that also ensures that more theaters will be up and running than they are now. So I know definitely in the US, hopefully in Canada. I know we already have some airline deals on the table for airline distribution. So I think next June is the time. And also, what's interesting is next June is the 50th anniversary of the Watergate break-in. So that's which means that was June 17th. So June 20th is the 50th anniversary of the recording of the 18.5 minute gap. So there's a lot of sort of natural, news cycle. CNN, I'm sure, will have documentaries about Watergate, and all the pundits will be back on. So it's a good time for us to get the film out there. But meanwhile, there's a lot of interest in not just in distributing the film in and of itself, but there's interest in turning it into a play. There's interest in maybe turning it into an episodic series, kind of expanding the world, because it is kind of a weird, unique world we come up with. And there's also some interest in doing the soundtrack release because it's all original Brazilian-based bossa nova music and songs, and I had a tremendous composer, Luis Guerra. And there's based on our screenings in Sao Paulo, there's a Brazilian label that's interested in doing the soundtrack release. So there's a lot to do with this. I don't know what my next film is going to be, but I never know. So, I'm looking at a few other projects now, but believe me, this is going to keep me busy for a long time.
Yes, and it's so wonderful. And is there anything else you'd like to add, Dan?
No, I mean my book is available. You can get it on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. It was published from Focal Press and Routledge, so it gets used in a lot of film schools. So I do a lot of guest lecturing at film schools also, which is a lot of fun. I enjoy doing that. And yeah, I mean, if people are interested in 18 and a half, just follow along on our social media. We're on all of them, and see where we're going to show up next. But yeah, that's about it. Depending on when this airs, the Whistler Film Festival is actually continuing online this month. And so our film 18 and a half, you can actually, if you go to the Whistler Film Festival, you may still be able to catch it and watch it online. Because a lot of festivals are doing these hybrid programs where they have some live screenings, but then also online screenings as well.
Well, actually, it will be because this month I'm actually going to be airing your incredible interview.
Thank you. Thanks,
I,
Kristen.
I want to thank you very much for your time, and too bad
Thank
we
you.
couldn't have done this in person, but virtually is fine too. So
Just as good.
yeah, congratulations.
All
And
right. Thank you.